Persona 4 Golden. Very hard, no random encounters. That's all. Seriously though, this challenge is something I wanted to do for a while, but I had no idea if it is even possible or how far I'd be able to get at all, so I'd say let's just start ahead and find out. Today we're playing Persona 4 Golden on the hardest difficulty, very hard, while only fighting mandatory battles and skipping everything else. So let's quickly go through the rules, and unlike the last run, there aren't that many this time around. First of all, obviously, we're not allowed to fight any random or optional encounters. The only battles we're going to be doing are the mandatory ones, meaning other than mini bosses and actual bosses, we won't fight a single battle in the entire challenge. The difficulty we're playing on is very hard. Actual battle difficulty between hard and very hard is the same, but very hard decreases the amount of experience and money you gain even more, so we'll do this on maximum torture mode. As always, no New Game Plus, we start off a fresh file for the ultimate experience. And last but not least, the goal of this challenge is to beat the game and achieve the true golden ending. Now, even though both the golden part and the final dungeon are technically optional, they do serve as quite a challenge towards the end of it, so it's only fair we'll take those into account as well. Another thing I want to quickly mention here is that I am experimenting with new ways to narrate those challenge runs. Usually I would do the majority of the run first, then write the script, and then start editing the game footage. In this one, I'm trying to already write the script as I am going through the challenge. This has the advantage that I will probably have a much easier time explaining everything, since memory of what happened is still somewhat fresh. It also makes post-production a little less time consuming. And for you, it's probably just as interesting because I literally have no idea what problems are coming up, so we're all on an equal level when it comes to what the hell is gonna happen next. Anyways, that's enough talk already, let's get started with the game now. We select the difficulty and get to name our main character. I went with my own name here since back in school I never did more than what was mandatory to get through, so this is kind of fitting somehow. We meet Nanako and Dojima, seal our fate by doing a handshake of doom, and go through the rest of the opening cutscenes. We find out about the TV world, Yosuke denies his shadow, and we're off into the first fight of the game. Since this is literally a casual playthrough at this point still, there isn't really much to mention here. Guard when Shadow Yosuke guards, use Seiyuu to get 1 Morse, and heal when HP are low. That's pretty much it, and the fight is won shortly afterwards. Both main character and Izanagi level up to 2, and we continue on. One thing I'd like to mention here is that in the difficulty settings we will change one little thing, which is retry in dungeons. If you game over on very hard, you'll be sent back to the title screen, and since we will need to grind a lot of chests, some of which can also contain enemies, the chance of the party being sniped and wiped is rather high, and I'm not really feeling like losing game progress over and over due to bad RNG. Other than that, everything else will stay the same though. We start Yosuke's confident and get the tutorial at Adara's, but we won't be buying anything here. Money is super tight at the beginning of the game, and other than selling off items in part-time jobs, we don't have a lot of possible income options either. Since we're also not going to fight any random encounters, we won't be getting any materials in order to upgrade our equipment, so Deidara is pretty much useless in this challenge. Shortly afterwards, we're already back into the TV world to save Yukiko, and here is where I realized yet another issue with this challenge. Usually in your first fight here, you get the shuffle time tutorial and are able to grab your first persona card. Since we never fight any random encounters though, we also don't get the tutorial and therefore have no chance to gain additional personas. This basically means that not only are we going to be severely underleveled, we're also going to be stuck with Izanagi throughout the entire challenge. Anyways, we head to the second floor, Chie denies her shadow, and you know what that means. And this is the first fight that already proved some difficulties. Shadow Chie is weak to wind, so we can get 1 Morse with Yosuke, though she usually puts up a wind wall after exposing her weakness, which is why we also use Bash. Shadow Chie also likes to use Mazio, which is Yosuke's weakness, so we definitely want to guard those turns where it happens. The pattern early on is relatively easy to read, so that is not really an issue. The bigger issue comes during the later parts of the battle, where she also decides to randomly use Mabufu at certain times, which does quite some damage to both party members. Since I haven't bought any value medicine, Keeping up with healing is actually quite the problem and we game over here several times, so yeah, in hindsight I should have probably gotten one or two of those to heal up. Eventually though, we get a decent enough pattern and are able to barely make it through the fight, which also puts main character at level 3. We leave the castle for now to regroup and also complete the first riddle quest, which gives us 3 chest keys as a reward. Keep those in mind for a bit later since they are actually pretty important. We also start Marie's social link since technically she's the only one required to get the golden exclusive dungeon later on. Generally, our social links will mostly focus on our party members. Unlike in Persona 5, other social links in Persona 4 don't give you any additional benefits in battle other than XP bonus during Persona Fusion, which we can't do anyways. Before heading back into the castle, we go to the item shop to buy 15 firecrackers, which is just enough to get us through the upcoming mini-boss. We won't need all of them, but I'd rather be safe here for now. With that, we're back into the TV world in order to rescue Yukiko. We basically grab every non-golden chest on the way in order to stack up items as we go up while trying to avoid encounters if possible. The first mini-boss of this game is the Avengers Knight. This one will always start the battle using Torokasha and then one-shot a party member. Luckily it has a weakness to fire which we can exploit using the firecrackers we bought earlier to make it dizzy and try to recover. The boss can technically use Red Wall to set up a fire resistance, but that only seems to happen if you knock it down, but not make it dizzy. This basically means that as soon as the boss gets back up again and attacks once, we can repeat the pattern from earlier again. We also use Rakukasha with Izanagi and the protagonist in order to make sure he can survive a hit. Due to our low level, the chance to get one shot is pretty high, so you want to make sure to protect him at all times in order to not game over. After doing this for 2 cycles, the boss will get back up and use Power Charge, which is guaranteed to one-shot any party member even with a defense buff and guard up, and unfortunately he always seems to target the main character. But fear not, because we already got the solution in our inventory. Those who paid attention to the video might have noticed that we picked up a physical mirror on floor 4 earlier. This was something I totally didn't notice until I checked how I could get around that. So we basically do the fight just like before until we get to the power charge, then throw the physical mirror on main character and reflect the attack back onto the boss. After that, it's basically back to the same pattern as before with firecrackers and the boss is down shortly afterwards. The experience from this fight takes main character from level 3 to 4, as well as Izanagi from 2 to 3. This also means we get access to Rakunda now. Not necessarily that useful for now, but it's always nice to have debuff options available. Yosuke also goes from 3 to 4, and Chie goes from 4 to 5. And those will be our levels for the boss fight of this dungeon against Shadow Yukiko, who's level 15 by the way. Since we basically stand no chance against the boss at this point, we still remain in the dungeon to stack up on items, and we need quite a few specific ones to get through here. First of all, just like before, we will need a couple of physical mirrors. Those can be found in chests on floor 4. We need those to repel physical damage in the upcoming boss fight against Shadow Yukiko, who will occasionally use Double Fangs as her only physical damage attack, and that is very likely to one-shot a character otherwise. Next up, we need Diamond Shields. Those spawn on floor 7 and increase the entire party's defense for 3 turns, so basically the same as the Marokukasha spell. Keeping our defense up at all times is literally the only way to survive the boss battle, so those are really important. Another useful item here are Smart Bombs. Just like the Diamond Shields, they can spawn on floor 7 and deal 100 almighty damage to all enemies. Those aren't technically needed, but it's our biggest source of possible damage, and since it's also AoE, it is really useful against the boss during the part with the Charming Prince. The last 2 items I want to mention are Revival Beads and Life Stones. Revival Beads can be found pretty much everywhere and are obviously useful for reviving dead party members. We can buy those at the item shop too, but the more we find here, the less we need to buy on later, so this is more a money saving thing than anything else. The Life Stones we're not specifically looking for since those can spawn everywhere as well, but the main reason we're taking those is the money. As you might have seen earlier, money is extremely tight throughout the entire game, and Life Stones sell for 1000 yen each piece, so that's a good way to get some decent money early in the game too. The last thing we do here before leaving is upgrading our equipment. Like mentioned earlier, due to us not fighting any random encounters, we will never get any materials needed to upgrade our equipment at Daedara's shop, so the only way we have here is to get upgrades via golden chests. This is also the reason we completed the first riddle quest earlier on in order to get 3 chest keys as a reward. The 2 items we're looking for here are the Gentleman Tux and the Combat Dress. The Gentleman Tux not only increases your defense, but they also give plus 50 max HP, which is a huge boost at this part of the game, so we will put those on both main character and Yosuke. The Combat Dress has Evade Fire on it, which is pretty nice considering Chie has a fire weakness. And that is all for Yukiko's castle right now. We return to the real world to prepare for the first big boss battle of the challenge. We go to Daedara's to sell off the lifestones we've gotten during grinding, and you can see that we're actually getting a decent chunk of money from them. We will wait with buying the items from the item shop until the next rainy day though, in order to get a 20% discount, which means we have a bit of free time until then. Because of that, we take our first job at a daycare center. The social link here isn't really that important, but it does raise our understanding and also gives a decent amount of money with 3,000 to start off, so that will be really useful for now with money still being pretty tight. We also hang out with Marie a few times to get her social link up and running. Since we're not able to fuse any personas, we are always going to miss out on a few points due to not being able to match the Arcana, so that is something to keep in mind here too. Once the rain sets in, we go to the item shop to prepare for the boss fight. We buy a total of 45 ice cubes and 17 ball lightnings. We probably won't need all of them since we're going to be dealing additional damage with all out attacks and smart bombs, but I wanted to play it as safe as somewhat possible, and we got a good amount of money at this point, so it shouldn't matter all too much. We also get 6 value medicines and 5 normal medicines for healing up. The value medicine is great since it's the only means to heal the full party, which we will definitely need because without it, I don't think we would even stand a chance at all. I also wanted to buy some more revival beads, but since we got 12 of them during item grinding, I thought this should be enough for this battle at least. And with that, we are back into the TV to go up against the first big boss battle of the challenge. Our setup is a level 4 main character with Izanagi on level 3, Yosuke on level 4, and Chie on level 5, going up against level 15 Shadow Yukiko. So our odds aren't necessarily the best to say at least, but let's see how far we can get. Yukiko's pattern is actually very easily readable for the first couple of turns. On the first turn we use ice cubes, followed by all out attacks, and a double ice cube by Chie to deal the best possible damage. This will trigger Yukiko to use white wall to set up an ice resistance. On turn 2, she will always set up for Burn to Ashes, so we can use that to throw a diamond shield to raise our defense, and also throw a physical mirror on main character to protect him from physical attacks. The next turn, we guard with everybody. This is literally the only way to survive Burn to Ashes. If we don't guard, or don't have a defense buff up, we're gonna get wiped guaranteed. At this point, I made my first mistake on the first attempt. Usually Yukiko follows up the next turn with a physical attack, but if you throw more ice cubes, there is a chance she will renew her white wall before it runs out, and then ready another Burn to Ashes. If you don't attack her with ice attacks the turn her resistance runs out, she will always use a physical attack, and I was hoping she would target main character since he has the mirror on, but the first one usually seems to target Chie. The second time her resistance ran out, I threw the physical mirror on Yosuke, thinking she would probably go for another physical attack, but instead she used Agi on the main character, and that was already it. The second attempt already got quite a bit further. Unlike in my first attempt, I didn't go for the physical mirror until after the Burn to Ashes attack, since she won't use physical attacks before that anyways. This allowed me to throw additional ice cubes, and also make sure she won't renew her ice wall preemptively. The first physical mirror will be used on Chie, since the majority of the time she will be targeted by the first physical attack. You go through that cycle one more time, and the following weakness hits are just enough to push her into the next phase and summon the Charming Prince. This has the advantage that we can go 2 full turns of exposing her weakness, and with Charming Prince being weak to electricity, we can deal some nice damage here. The Charming Prince likes to inflict ailments like silence on the party, which is usually not a big issue since we're mostly working with items anyways. This is also the point where we're starting to use our smart bombs. The Charming Prince will automatically run away once you dealt a certain amount of damage to him, so having items that do 100 AoE damage here is a huge help and the main reason we grinded those to begin with. And just as I say this, Chie gets Agi'd and the Burn to Ashes wipes the remaining party, ending attempt number 2. This is something that can happen at any given time at this point, so yeah, you can see how quickly a promising attempt can end like this. The next attempt right after went much better. Ideally you want to time the Charming Prince running away while Yukiko doesn't have a white wall up, since that way you can once again get 2 full turns of damage without having to fear any sort of backlash. At this point Yukiko will also start using Terra Voice, and if Yosuke is alive, she will always target him, and that is actually a good thing. After Terra Voice, she will always follow up with Shivering Rondo, which is a guaranteed wipe for the character inflicted with fear. This one can be easily recovered from though, and considering at this point of the fight Yukiko can always use Burn to Ashes without warning, this is way less dangerous. Unfortunately, I didn't pay close enough attention afterwards, which is what almost cost me the attempt. I thought Yukiko's wall was already over and threw an Ice Cube with Yosuke. Because of that, I had to heal with Chie and couldn't guard with her, and of course she hits Burn to Ashes right after. Luckily, she went for another Terra Voice right after recovery, which gave me a chance to set up again and also deal some more damage. Shadow Yukiko at this point is almost done, so I took the risky route, throwing items at her, hoping for it to be enough damage, and the last smart bomb by Chie is just enough to beat Shadow Yukiko and end the battle on only our 3rd attempt. The party members all went to level 6, with Izanagi now being level 4, and that's it for the first dungeon of the game. This was already pretty brutal, but more manageable than I thought at first, but yeah, things definitely aren't getting any easier from this point on forward. We used the remaining rainy days to play with the capsule machine at the item shop. Those are only working on rainy days, and our goal here is to actually get them stuck. If that happens, the shop owner comes out to help you and usually gives you chest keys as an apology. This is pretty much the most consistent way to get chest keys for now until we unlock the vegetable garden later on. Yukiko returns to school, we eat all the girls' food and continue on. During nighttime we also start to study more often. We want to get our knowledge up a little before the upcoming exams, and we also need to max out our knowledge eventually anyways. Naoto is the only party member that requires social stats to start her social link, with knowledge and courage needing to be maxed. We continue building our social links with Marie and also start the social link with Yukiko now. We will try to get Yukiko up high quickly, since my plan for her is to be in the final party setup as well. Last but not least, we also start the social link with Adachi. While he's technically not required in order to get the true golden ending, I do feel like his part is important enough to the story to justify maxing him out as well. Since we pretty much only focus on party members and Marie, having one more social link to max out shouldn't be such a big issue. Kanji appears on television and shortly afterwards is already kidnapped and thrown into the TV, starting off the 2nd dungeon of this challenge run. We make our way through the bathhouse until we reach floor 7, where the mini-boss Hulk Hogan is waiting. The mini-boss itself is pretty much free, since the only thing he does is buff himself, charge up, and then throw out a single target physical attack that can easily be reflected with a physical mirror. On the first attempt, I did this fight with a full party, where everybody but Yukiko got from level 6 to 7. Since Yosuke is going to be ditched after this dungeon though, and she is also not gonna be a part of the party much longer, I thought it might be better if I did the fight with only Yukiko at our side to increase the total amount of experience for both of them, just to see where it would get me. Every level is extremely important in this challenge, so we want to distribute our experience as efficient as somewhat possible. Because of that, I did the fight again with only 2 party members. Unfortunately, the result was still the same. Main character went from 6 to 7, with Yukiko not gaining a single level at all. Since this felt really unoptimized, I went into the battle for a 3rd time. This time only using our main character, and this was probably the right way to go at it. This time we went from level 6 to 9, with Izanagi also gaining 2 levels instead of just 1. Those 2 levels might make quite a difference, so I am pretty sure this is the best way to approach things. And yeah, that's already pretty much everything for this dungeon. The only thing left at this point is Shadow Kanji, and if you remember how the fight with Shadow Yukiko went, this one's not going to be any easier. Before we can approach the boss though, we still need to grind quite a few items to have a realistic chance of winning here. This time we specifically focus on physical mirrors and smart bombs, which we're going to need a couple of. Because of that, we go back to Yukiko's castle. Floor 4 has a decent chance of spawning physical mirrors, and floor 7 can spawn smart bombs, as well as diamond shields and magical mirrors. The next thing is upgrading our equipment again. The bathhouse spawns a new set of armors for our party, which we're going to use to up our defense. While trying to grind out those items, I noticed something else though. Floor 2 of the bathhouse seems to have a pretty decent drop rate for physical mirrors, seemingly much better than Yukiko's floor 4. So going forward, this will probably become our go-to spot for physical mirrors. Now, going back to the armor upgrades, the things we're looking for here are the steel pannier for the girls, which also come with a nice plus 20 SP passive, and the Chingy Fundoshi for the guys. This one only comes with plus 10 HP instead of the plus 50 we had before, but it does have much higher defense and also evasion, so we're probably still better off using those. Once we're done with everything, we are theoretically ready for the boss, but once again we leave the dungeon for now to come back later. We still want to stack up on healing items in the item shop, and considering money is still tight, we want to use that 20% discount to our advantage, so we wait for the first rainy day before going back in. Also, one of the most important parts I almost forgot here. With the help of Nanako, we build a vegetable garden.
Great vegetables.
Vegetables are really useful for the challenge run, and it isn't necessarily the reason you might think of first. Other than combat items, we can also grow wheat here, which functions like a chest key. Since we don't really have a lot of ways to have a decent supply of chest keys, using wheat seedlings is a great way to guarantee a decent amount for future golden chest grinds. We also hang out with our party a couple of more times, specifically Yukiko, to get her up as quickly as possible. Once the rain starts, we drop by the item shop and stack up on value medicines. We don't get the next healing upgrade just yet, but considering our party is so underleveled anyways, those will do just fine. With that, we're back into the TV and about to approach boss number 2. Our party now consists of a level 9 main character, with Yosuke and Chie being level 6, and Yukiko being level 15 going up against the level 25 boss. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the answer is a lot, but let's just see for ourselves. Shadow Kanji is being accompanied by Nice Guy and Tough Guy. Nice Guy is mostly here to buff the others and has an ice weakness, while Tough Guy tries to damage the party and is weak to fire. Kanji himself unfortunately has no weakness and can also do a variety of attacks, but luckily his pattern is somewhat readable for the most part. As always, we start by throwing a diamond shield in order to increase everybody's defense. Since Tough Guy is weak to fire, you can actually make him dizzy by attacking him with fire twice, though this was a bad idea because it results in Nice Guy casting a red wall on him. This is something I unfortunately only noticed after my first attempt that you see right now. Kanji himself will always open the fight with Forbidden Murmur, which does not damage the party, but poisons the male characters. The physical mirrors are mostly going to be used on the protagonist, since a physical attack that hits is probably a guaranteed wipe, which we obviously want to avoid. On the second turn, Shadow Kanji will always use Masio. Both Yosuke and Chie need to guard this in order to survive. Yukiko can tank it due to her higher level, as well as our main character, since Izanagi has an electricity resistance. After that, we heal up and try to do damage with smart bombs, as well as elemental items to exploit the ad's weaknesses. Luckily, Nice Guy only has 800 HP, so getting rid of him is not that big of an issue in general. Once you get Shadow Kanji to below 75% of his HP, you will once again use Masio, and this was something that I wasn't aware of at first. Because of that, both Yosuke and Chie went down, and the following rampage also got rid of Yukiko, leaving only our leader alive. I still tried to recover and get everybody back up with arrival beats, but at this point it was too late and another see you in the face sealed the deal for our first attempt. Every boss battle is a learning curve, so I was not surprised to not get a first try victory here. Let's see if attempt number 2 went any better. The start was pretty much like before, though this time we only down Tough Guy but don't make him dizzy. This results in Nice Guy always using Rapatra instead of setting up a red wall, so he basically completely wastes his turns instead of potentially buffing Kanji or Tough Guy. Other than that, it was pretty much the same as the previous attempt, up to the point where we are 1/4 through Shadow Kanji's HP. This time we let Yosuke guard to prevent the one more. Chie still goes down, but since we got quite a few revival beats, it's not really a big issue. If anybody attacks main character, it's also important to not forget to set up the physical mirror again. Forbidden Murmur and Roar of Wrath are two of the most ideal attacks in this fight, since they don't do any damage, but only apply status ailments, which we can easily heal with items. At this point we also get rid of Nice Guy already, which makes the fight quite a bit more manageable. Since Nice Guy is gone, we can now safely make Tough Guy dizzy to prevent him from attacking for a turn. We're also getting Kanji close to half of his HP, where he will use Fanatical Spark, which is probably a wipe unless I'm guarding with the majority of the party, so I tried to play things a little more careful here. Unfortunately, the falling Rampage by Tough Guy already screwed out things royally, wiping half of my party, and of course as soon as we get all party members back up, Fanatical Spark happens and there goes attempt number 2. We made some progress, but we're still quite a bit off in order to win this one. Attempt number 3 was pretty much the same in the beginning. This time something else happened though. Just when we got close to getting Kanji to the 50% mark, he used Swift Strike and wiped everybody. To this point I actually thought he'd only use Swift Strike after a power charge, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be a thing, as it seemingly happens randomly once you get to a certain point of the battle. So once again we go back into battle for yet another try, but again, Rampage by Tough Guy wiped half of my party, and even though I somehow managed to recover, just afterwards another Rampage hit, and then another Swift Strike hit, and yeah, this attempt wasn't going anywhere either. At this point I was pretty sure that I needed to change up my strategy a little, or else this is not going to work out. The biggest issue is the random possibility of getting hit by an AoE physical attack, so I thought maybe I'm better off throwing physical mirrors not just on the protagonist, but on everybody. Since the party can technically tank everything else if I played smart, I thought those mirrors won't be going to waste for the most part anyways. Unfortunately, I pushed Shadow Kanji a little bit too early, which resulted in half of the party getting wiped due to Mazio the following turn. At this point, I was pretty sure that this fight is over, but I decided to keep going and try to recover, since I wanted to get a feeling on how my mirror on everybody strategy was gonna work out. To my surprise, I was actually able to recover and get everybody back on track again. Also shoutouts to Tough Guy for attacking Yukiko 3 turns in a row when I had no physical mirror on any party member. Shortly afterwards, Nice Guy was gone and I tried setting everything up again. Kanji was getting very close to half of his HP, so I tried to get physical mirrors on everybody and then push him. Before that happened though, Tough Guy decided to throw in a Rampage and actually killed himself in the process due to being reflected 3 times. Afterwards, we defend with everybody but Chie and throw one more Smart Bomb to push him into the next phase. The Fanatical Spark wipes both Yosuke and Chie, but the other two surprisingly took little damage, so that made me pretty confident that we can win this. Once again we try to recover and set everything back up before going back to work on the boss. After a few more turns, we get relatively close to the last 25% of his HP, at which point he will do another Fanatical Spark. One last time we guard with everybody but Chie and have her throw the Smart Bomb to push him into the last phase. Surprisingly though, we still seem to be a little bit off, since the next attack wasn't the anticipated Fanatical Spark, but a Swift Strike, which swiftly got reflected 4 times. For a moment I actually thought about trying to go for the kill this turn already and maybe even skip the second Fanatical Spark, but in the end I played it safe, since it would be a guaranteed wipe if we couldn't get the kill here. We tank the Fanatical Spark, get Chie up the following turn while leaving Yosuke down, and throw one last Smart Bomb to finish off the fight on the 5th attempt. Second boss down, we're making good progress so far. Our main character gains another level, going from 9 to 10, with Chie going from 6 to 8. We actually left Yosuke down at the end of the fight on purpose, since he will be replaced by Kanji now, and therefore I wanted to get more experience on the rest of the party members. Kanji accepts his other self, and we leave the TV world again for now. Since we're already pretty close to the deadline, the fog sets in shortly afterwards, Kanji recovers and joins the party. We get a scooter from Daddy Dojima, which means we can now drive around town freely, and this is pretty important. By driving around the neighborhood 3 times, we get access to Okina and the cinema. Taking party members to the cinema not only gives the party members extra stats, but they also gain a level every time you watch a movie. Unfortunately, you can only go to the cinema once per month with each party member, but in a challenge like this, every extra level is very much appreciated. The cinema will mostly be used on days where the important party member social links are unavailable, as well as on rainy days where we have nothing else to do for the most part anyways. During evening hours, we also try to get our knowledge and courage up. Knowledge is pretty good for the test results to get bonus accessories from Nanako, and we need max knowledge and courage in order to start Naoto's social link later on. We take up the job in the hospital and meet Sayoko there. This job not only pays decently well, but it also increases our courage, which we need anyways, so this comes in pretty handy. Once the rain sets in, we go into the item shop again and stack up on items. At this point we have access to ointments and medical kits which heal for 200 HP, so that's a pretty nice upgrade as well. We also plant wall paprikas in the vegetable garden. Those give an elemental resist for the next 3 turns, which could come in very handy soon. And that's already pretty much it for free time. Rise gets interviewed, shortly afterwards gets kidnapped and shows up on the Midnight Channel, so we are off into the next section of the game. The upcoming mini-boss uses physical attacks exclusively, so once again we remove everybody from the party to maximize the experience on our protagonists. Since the boss also always opens up with stagnant air, we shouldn't have any problems setting up either. Well, it turns out that this is only partially true. While the boss does indeed open up with stagnant air, it actually gets in 2 turns before we can act. Now this would be bad because the second attack is guaranteed to wipe us, but we actually get lucky here and dodge the incoming wipe. I have no idea what the chances on this are, but I'll gladly take it considering this suddenly got a lot more dangerous than I initially thought it was gonna be. Anyways, the boss has a set cycle where he will use stagnant air first, then follow up with 2 physical attacks and repeat that pattern. Since it is also weak to fire, we can throw a firecracker to hit the weakness and then follow it up with a physical mirror. On turns where it uses stagnant air, we can throw a double firecracker and then we basically repeat that process until the boss is down. Main character levels from 10 to 13, with Izanagi also going up from 7 to 9, so you can see that fighting mini-bosses solo does actually give quite some decent experience and level ups. And with that, we're basically already done with the dungeon. As always before approaching the boss, we're going to go on an item grind, this time with some new additions though. The Morokyu Striptease is the first dungeon to drop Magatamas, which are our first and only upgrade when it comes to item damage, with them dealing 150 damage. Until now, our biggest damage source were Smart Bombs, which do 100 AoE almighty damage. Our designated grinding spot for this is going to be floor 3. Floor 3 is a fixed floor layout, meaning that the chests are always on the same place. If you enter it from floor 4, you're basically spawning right next to 2 chests, with the third one not being too far off either, so this is pretty much ideal for grinding. Other items worth mentioning on this floor are Smart Bombs, and also Supersonics, which increase the party's hit rate and evasion. Those aren't really that important since we try not having to rely on random dodges, but who knows when they might come in handy. Last but not least, we're also looking for equipment upgrades again. The 2 new items are the purple suits for the guys and the Armada Bustier for the girls. The purple suits have nice defense and also small chance to reflect physical attacks, adding a tiny extra layer of safety to them. The Armada Bustiers have +5 magic, which, while nice, isn't really that necessary for the most part, but again, it's a defense and evasion increase. And with that, we are ready to approach the next big boss of the game, or in this case, the big boss says. At this point we have our protagonist on level 13, with Chie on 9, Yukiko on 16, and Kanji on 26, going up against the level 35 boss. The first part of this boss battle is relatively easy. With one exception, Shadow Rize uses magic attacks only, so we can use the magic mirrors we gathered so far to reflect all that damage back, while also dealing a bit of extra damage on turns where she only uses single target magic. Once her HP gets to a certain point, she will use Mind Slice once, so we also set up physical mirrors to reflect that back as well, and that's usually enough already to get her into her scripted phase. When she uses Supreme Insight, we throw a magic mirror on protagonist and defend with everybody else. Since the party gets a full heal going into the next part, it doesn't matter if everybody else goes down here. And that's already part 1 done. This fight seems to be rather safe, which is nice. Shadow Teddy, on the other hand, is a little bit scarier. We start the fight throwing physical mirrors, since Teddy does also use Heat Wave occasionally. Throwing magic mirrors here, just like with Yukiko and Kanji before, is a bad idea since he absorbs ice attacks. Considering he only has Bufudyne and Mabufula, which he usually only uses after Mind Charge first, this shouldn't be such a big deal. We also set up our defense buffs and start going to work with the newly acquired Magatamas. Since Teddy has quite a few attacks that don't do damage, this actually makes setting up relatively easy for the most part. Once he goes for Mind Charge though, things start getting interesting. I was curious if we'd be able to take the hit with the whole party guarding, and the answer to this is... well, no. A charged Mabufula does almost 400 damage to main character with him having only about 200 HP, so yeah, that is not going to work. If you remember, we planted wall paprikas before coming in here, but didn't have time to harvest them yet, so that is something that could help here. Even with the 50% resist though, it might still be a one-shot depending on the damage range. Because of that, I wanted to try something else first. Our second attempt actually went much smoother than the first one. We reflect back a Heat Wave for some good damage, and actually push Teddy towards the first scripted Ultra Charge, and this might be my favorite attack in the entire fight. Teddy basically does nothing for 2 turns and then uses Nihil Hand, which can easily be blocked by just guarding with everybody. We continue throwing Magatamas until Teddy goes for Mind Charge for the first time now. This time we actually throw a magic mirror on main character. Even though Teddy will drain the reflect, I wanted to see how much HP he gets back that way, and it's only about 300, so roughly 2 Magatamas, which is not that bad at all. Both Chie and Yukiko go down, but we can just easily revive them and go back to work. At this point I also noticed something else. I was pretty sure that one mirror overrides the effect of the other one, but to my surprise, it seems that in Persona 4 you can actually stack them on top of each other, since the physical mirror was still active even after the magical mirror was used up. This is something I didn't know at first, but it's actually a pretty important thing to know since it might make some of the later parts much more manageable. Anyways, once you get Teddy to half HP, the first scripted Nullity Guidance happens. Usually the first time he only hits one character, and of course he hits our protagonist and the fight is over. Just like the charged Mabufula, it did around 400 damage, but if we guard before that, we might just be able to tank it. I don't know if he has any preference for which characters to hit, but if it's all evened out, there is only a 25% chance of main character being hit, so we might have just gotten unlucky here. And this is pretty much what happened on the next attempt. This time he hit Chie and then charges up for another Nihil Hand, which gives us more than enough time to recover and get back on track again. Once we guard the Nihil Hand, we keep throwing Magatamas to do more damage. The last scripted attack happens when you get him down to 25% HP, where he will use Nullity Guidance again, this time on 2 characters though. Like mentioned before, we preemptively guard this time, and would you look at that? We actually survived with more than 30 HP remaining. Although this was probably a low roll on damage, it seems we can consistently survive that as long as the guard is up. Afterwards, he charges up again, which gives us a good opportunity to get back up, and then guard the incoming Nihil Hand. At this point, I started playing it real safe. I am pretty sure Teddy can just use Mabufula without mind charging in the later parts of the battle, so we usually guard with main character to play it as safe as somewhat possible. The other party members are trying to get the physical mirrors back up, heal, and then throw some more Magatamas. The occasional Foolish Whisper is basically a free turn since the silence doesn't matter at all. Same goes for Marakunda. This can easily be countered by just using another Diamond Shield the following turn, which leaves the other characters free to attack. A Reflected Heatwave does tons of damage to Shadow Teddy, and we're able to finish him up the following turn with a couple of Smart Bobs on only our third attempt. Admittedly, this boss fight wasn't as bad as I first expected it to be. Main character gets a single level going from level 13 to 14, with Izanagi going from 9 to 10, and Chie also going from 9 to 10. Chie is going to be replaced by Teddy after this one, so theoretically we could have maxed our experience by having Chie dead at the end of the battle, but those boss fights are already brutal enough without trying to min-max, so we'll just take it. Also, I just want to emphasize that this is also the introduction to my personal favorite face portrait in Persona 4, Flat Teddy. I mean, just look at this thing, it's hilarious. Anyways, we're back into the real world and have quite some free time now before the next story related part happens. We continue working on the social links of our main party members and also finally get the chance to start off Kanji's social link. Once July hits, we go back to the cinema again. Every level counts considering those add up quite a bit throughout the course of the game. The rest is pretty much like before. During evenings we either work at the hospital to rank our courage up, read some books for more knowledge, and also take care of the vegetable garden. When the fog sets in, nobody appears on TV and Reese stays safe, but King Moron is hanging around upside down in town. At this point, Yukiko is also the first party member to reach rank 9, which grants her Endure. We will get this on every party member eventually, which will be quite useful. We also start off Reese's social link. Her level up skills aren't really useful, but her social link perks are really nice to have, so we definitely want to put some time into her as well. Midterms hit, and since we aced those due to her knowledge stat and me totally not looking up the answers online, we get the paper armband from Nanako, which increases all our stats by 5, so that's a real nice boost considering our stats are pretty garbage to begin with due to the low persona level. I feel really bad for completely neglecting Nanako's social link, but considering we have to get both our knowledge and courage up to 5 before we unlock Naoto, we really don't have that much downtime during evenings. Anyways, the rain sets in again and the supposed kill of King Moron appears on the Midnight Channel. His name is Mitsuo Kubo, and with that information, we're already back into the TV world to investigate further. Chie gets replaced with Teddy, and we get going. Once we hit floor 7, we prepare for the mini-boss. This one, once again, is free, but unlike the last 2 times, we can't go through this one with just the protagonist. We're going to need at least 3 party members, so I removed Teddy and went at it. The reason why we need 3 party members is that the mini-boss will pretty much only summon an Almighty Hand when there is none on the field. The Almighty Hand has a total of 284 HP, so it can easily be taken out with 3 Smart Bombs, which at the same time also damage the mini-boss itself. And yeah, suddenly it did Deathbound. Once again we got really lucky here. Both Kanji and main character dodged, while Yukiko was able to take the hit thanks to her rank 9 Endure. Afterwards, it's just a couple of more Smart Bombs and the fight is already over again. This was actually scarier than I first thought it would be, but we got through it on the first attempt, so I'm not going to complain about it. We also gain another level from 14 to 15, with Izanagi going from 10 to 11, so that's nice too. We also managed to find a Paladin armor on the way, which is the new equipment for the guys. Unfortunately, this one is not that useful. While it does have higher defense, it has much lower evasion, and instead of a counter, it has dodge physical on it, so I do think we're actually better off with the current armor on the guys. Luckily, the girls version is much more useful. The Charm Drape not only has more defense, but it has an extra +5 endurance on it. While it does have slightly less evasion, I don't think the 1 point is gonna matter too much compared to the other benefits. We also did the item grind here, but I didn't record most of it because it's pretty much the same thing for several hours, though we did find a new spot to grind on. Floor 6 of the new dungeon is even better than floor 3 of the previous one. This one not only drops Frost Magatamas, but at the same time it also drops magic mirrors, which we only somewhat consistently found on floor 7 in Yukiko's castle so far. Those are becoming increasingly important at this point, so having a floor which can drop both Magatamas and also magic mirrors is incredibly useful. Once we stacked up on the items needed, we are ready to approach the next boss of the game, and yeah, I cannot open the boss door. When you beat the mini-boss on floor 7, there is a chest behind it containing the Orb of Darkness, which is needed to open up the boss door, which, well, I forgot. So once again we go down all the way to floor 7, grab the orb, and then go back up to the final floor again. And honestly, going in, this was one of the bosses I was most scared of, and rightfully so. There are actually two things about this fight. The first one is the hero form, which exclusively attacks with almighty attacks, so we have no way to reflect the damage or anything, and as you can see, those attacks hit hard. And if this wasn't bad enough already, the boss also gets 2 actions per turn, so there is even more incoming damage that we have to manage somehow. But wait, that's not even all. Even with a guarding main character, the boss has roughly a 50-50 chance of one-shotting our protagonist from full HP depending on the damage roll. Luckily, this only goes for his attack command. The item command is usually safe, but it does feel like he very rarely ever uses this. Once the hero form is destroyed, we now have to fight Baby Mitsuo and prevent him from rebuilding it. If he successfully rebuilds the hero, the battle is over, since at that point he will use Gigadyne, which is an AoE almighty attack that is guaranteed to wipe the entire party at our level. The first time Baby Mitsuo shows up, he will put up an elemental wall and then use the corresponding spell 3 times, which we can easily reflect back at him. The bigger problem here is that, just like in his hero form, he also attacks twice per turn, and this is where things go down quickly. While we can reflect back the first attack, the following physical attack can easily wipe a character, and since we also have to re-up our magical mirrors the following turn, recovery is incredibly hard at this point. Once he starts rebuilding, you need to deal about 600 damage in his first stage to interrupt the process and get back to where you started from. Once he starts building the second stage, you need even more damage to knock him down, so you want to try to avoid that if possible. When he starts rebuilding the hero, you just rinse and repeat, and to be honest, I got surprisingly far on my first attempt. The problem here was that we pushed him past the 50% HP threshold right after he started his 3-turn cycle of AoE magic, which means he will start rebuilding the hero now. We throw 4 Magatamas to knock him back down, but since he's still in his cycle, he just uses Moragion and wipes the entire party. So yeah, while we did get somewhat lucky, it was still an incredibly messy fight and we only got through roughly half of the boss's HP. Unlike other boss fights, I'm not going to show you every attempt here because otherwise this video would take all day long, so let's just go through the most important parts here. The first phase is the hero form, and like mentioned earlier, there is a roughly 50-50 chance the main character gets wiped from full HP on the attack command, even with a defense buff and a guard up. Luckily, the first time this happens, Yukiko intervenes and prevents the one-shot due to her social rank. If that happens twice, it's game over. Because of that, I came up with a different idea that involves not only setting up a defense buff, but also using Masukunda on the boss to decrease his hit rate, and throwing a supersonic to increase my own, and this worked out pretty well for the most part. Hero form has 1400 HP, so you need a total of 10 items to get through it. Usually we went with 8 Magatamas followed by 2 smart bombs in order to save some Magatamas for later. With this strategy, I got through the hero phase roughly 3 out of 5 times. The second important thing is trying to get the last hit on the hero phase within the first or second action on that turn. Turns actually continue on normally after the hero form is destroyed, so by beating it on the beginning of the turn, you have a few more remaining actions with your other characters before Baby Mitsuo gets to act for the first time. I had a couple of attempts where I intentionally stalled out on damage to make sure to beat the hero form in the beginning of a turn. Once that is done, we can try to set up a couple of physical mirrors with the remaining characters in order to prevent him from wiping them with his regular attack. Another problem that happens occasionally is fear. Baby Mitsuo uses Evil Smile, which is an AoE fear attack, and if that hits several characters, there is a good chance it's game over as well. The next problem is that you actually don't want to push him through his phase too quickly. If you do that, he starts building 2 stages of his hero phase within a single turn, which automatically results in a wipe. So basically, once you make it past the hero form, you need to juggle your mirrors, heal and revive if necessary, and also keep track of Baby Mitsuo's HP all at the same time, while things like fear can still easily destroy your attempt and there is nothing you can do about it. After about 5 hours of attempts, I didn't really manage to make any progress in this fight at all. Something always came in my way. Either it was getting wiped early in the hero phase, unexpected attacks from Shadow Mitsuo that ended up wiping party members, or accidentally pushing him into the next phase too early. Baby Mitsuo switches phases at 50, 35 and 20% remaining HP from what I've found out so far. The first phase shouldn't be that big of an issue. Once you push him into phase 2, he stops using elemental walls and focuses on either physical damage or status ailments during his building process. In phase 3, he starts building 2 stages of the hero per turn, but it takes him 3 turns in total to finish the entire thing off. The last phase is where it gets real dangerous, since you will exclusively rebuild the hero, and with 2 actions per turn, that means once he starts setting it up, you have 1 more turn remaining until you get wiped. The problem is, when he hits this phase, he still has 800 HP left, and we can't actually deal more than 600 damage per turn with 4 Magatamas. Because of that, I came up with a strategy. Once we push him past the 50% threshold, we continue on like normal, but once we get towards the 20% mark, things will get tricky. Ideally, once we get close to that point, he's about to rebuild the hero. The plan now is to destroy the hero on the first or second action of that turn, while also pushing him into the last phase at the same time. This way we can throw 2 more Magatamas before he will start trying to rebuild the hero again. Once that happens, he should have less than 600 HP remaining, meaning that a full turn of Magatamas should be able to get me the victory. Now keep in mind everything I mentioned earlier, like Mitsuo attacking random party members with physical attacks or inflict the status ailments. All of that can happen at any time, so while this strategy might work, it will be incredibly finicky to execute. Because of that, I also decided to do something I'm absolutely not a fan of: damage counting. I got out my calculator since it was the only way to guarantee not overshooting on damage and pushing the boss too early. Alrighty, we got everything set up, let's see how this strategy works out. Again, nothing much to say about the first hero phase. Set up all your stuff and hope your characters dodge as much as possible while wearing it down. We managed to destroy the hero with the first action, meaning that we can now set up 3 physical mirrors before Baby Mitsuo gets to act. Afterwards, it's the classic 3-turn magic attack setup that we can easily reflect with mirrors. Once the 3 reflected attacks run out, he starts rebuilding for the first time. At this point we have done 1171 damage. We throw physical mirrors on everybody, heal up and then start doing damage. Like mentioned earlier, at this point 4 Magatamas are already enough to break the building process. At this point we dealt 2004 damage, so just barely enough to push him into phase 2, where he immediately starts rebuilding the hero again. Once again we set up our physical mirrors and go back to dealing damage with Magatamas. The last Magatama to destroy the build brings us to 2604 damage, and at this point I wasn't sure whether to go for the all-out attack or not. My head started calculating all different kinds of scenarios to make sure we won't push him into the last phase too early. Eventually I decided to go for it, since 4 more Magatamas would barely push him into the next phase, so the roughly 50 damage from the all-out attack could be useful in terms of pushing him deeper into the next phase. I decided against throwing additional Magatama here, since we want him to start rebuilding the hero before we can actually push him. Since we're in phase 3, he will build 2 stages on the first turn, but then take 2 more turns to actually complete it. After throwing 3 more Magatamas, we were only 91 damage off from the last phase, but at this point I also noticed that Baby Mitsuo went into a slow HP animation, and suddenly I wasn't so sure anymore if he switches phases with 20 or 25% of his HP remaining. Yukiko guarded, because one more attack will definitely push him, so I just hoped that the down animation and the phase change happened at 2 different times, and luckily they did. Baby Mitsuo didn't complete the hero, but went for Evil Smile, which luckily only hit Kanji. We heal Kanji and continue throwing Magatamas. When he is in the second stage of rebuilding, you need roughly 800 damage to interrupt him, so 3 more Magatamas should do the job. And then the worst mistake happened and I accidentally guarded with Yukiko again instead of throwing a Magatama. At this point, I thought the battle was over since we already pushed him into the last phase, but to my surprise, he didn't complete the hero, but instead used the Kasha and another Evil Smile, which again luckily didn't hit our protagonist. I have no idea why he did that instead of completing the hero, and this pretty much goes against everything I have learned about this boss fight so far, but who am I to complain? Let's finish this battle off for good. We heal the fear, and throw more Magatamas to destroy the setup, and continue on. At this point the battle is pretty much won, but once again this fight surprises me. Instead of building 2 stages like he's supposed to, he actually attacks Kanji first, and then starts rebuilding the hero. I swear nothing about this fight makes any sense anymore. Luckily we still had physical mirrors on everybody, but at this point I was more confused than anything else. Anyways, we throw the last remaining Magatamas and finally finish off the fight for good. This was definitely by far the hardest part of the challenge up to this point, and even though I expect the next 2 bosses to be a little easier, this challenge is still far from won. Also, funnily enough, Yukiko was the only character to get a level up from this battle. Not even our protagonist leveled up this time. We return to the real world with Mitsuo and the police takes him away, so all is good, right? Since we got quite some downtime now, we continue working on our social links just like before. Rise is especially important here. We want to get her to at least rank 9 before the next dungeon, since that allows her to block an AoE attack that would otherwise wipe at least one party member. More safety nets are always appreciated. Once the new month hits, we take the party to the cinema just like before in order to gain another level on everybody. Yosuke and Chie will be ignored at this point, but we will still level both Yukiko and Kanji since I wasn't 100% sure yet who will be better for the final party setup. Speaking of Yukiko, she's also the first social link to be maxed out. The evade passives will come in very handy during later parts of the challenge, so maxing all party members that are used is definitely advised. We take everybody to the beach, tell Kanji to let him dangle since that is basically the only right choice, and also unlock the bike rides with our party members now. Going on bike rides either lets the party members relearn forgotten skills or gain new additional ones. The skills we're looking for here for the most part are Yukiko, who learns Mataronda on the 2nd and Mind Charge on the 5th trip, Kanji, who learns Fast Heal on the 4th one, Teddy with Evade Physical on the 5th one, and eventually Naoto with Divine Grace on the 5th one as well. Bike rides with Rise don't give her new skills, but increase the damage of all out attacks if she decides to join into it. This one we will only do if there is nothing better available on those days. Nanako is on summer break as well and asks us to help her with her homework, and this was probably the most painful thing to do in the entire challenge run because we actually have to say no to poor little Nanako. As much as I wanted to help her, time management is really tight and helping Nanako locks us out of several nights, so I'm sorry Nanako, please forgive me once again. But we go to the Fireworks Festival, which also includes the return of Flat Teddy, and shortly afterwards get into more contact with Naoto. Once September hits, we also go to the cinema with all our party members again, and ideally you want to take all of them there before the next dungeon section starts, since it locks you out of going there as long as you didn't complete the dungeon. When it starts raining, we also go back into the item shop to stack up on healing items. At this point we can get the antibiotic gel, as well as maca leaves, which both heal for 400 HP, so we buy 15 of each. We could buy life bombs as well, but those drop on the same floor where we grind physical mirrors, so it's not really needed. Naoto gives an interview on TV, and you guessed it, disappears shortly afterwards and shows up on the Midnight Channel, so we are off into the next dungeon of the game once again. We can take on the mini-boss with solo protagonists, so we make our way through the secret laboratory until we get there. The dominating machine only does two things, charge and Herculean Strike, and once again we are on the lucky string on mini-bosses here since the boss actually gets 2 turns before we can act. Luckily we reflect the first Herculean Strike since we still have to counter armor, and with that the battle is already won. We alternate between Rakunda and throwing physical mirrors until the boss gets into low HP. When that happens, he's going to blow up a few turns after, which doesn't do any damage because we have Rise who will protect our protagonist from a fatal blow, and the battle is already over. The counter at the beginning of the battle was nice, but it probably wasn't even necessary since I'm pretty sure we could take the explosion with a defense buff and a guard as well, but we'll never find out I guess. This battle does actually give pretty decent experience though, putting our protagonist from level 15 to 18, with Izanagi going from 11 to 14 as well. So now that we have beaten the mini boss, we can advance further in the— oh my god, it happened again. Remember how I forgot to pick up the chest containing the orb in the last dungeon to proceed further? Yeah, same thing here. We beat the boss, but never grabbed the chest behind it. So once again we go up to floor 4, grab the keycard, and then manage to continue on. Once we get to the boss room, we're ready to go at it. Luckily we still have quite some magic mirrors from before left over, and we're not going to need any Magatamas here either because, believe it or not, we will do the entire boss fight with solo protagonist. With one exception, Naoto only uses physical or elemental magic attacks, meaning we can pretty much reflect everything back. Considering Naoto has like 10 different magic attacks and only one physical attack, we start off the battle by throwing a magic mirror, and of course we get Brave Bladed out of our boots. Consider that bad luck, nothing I can really do here. By the way, the reason Rise didn't block this one is because it is a single target attack and Rise only intervenes on AoE attacks. Unfortunately, I couldn't quite get her to rank 10 before this, otherwise I would have also had the free enduring soul revive, but whatever, it's not that big of an issue. Attempt number 2 started off with the best possible attack, Mudre. This one gets reflected back and actually puts silence on Shadow Naoto. Because of this, we have a few turns to set up both mirrors, and from this point on forward, we really don't have anything to fear anymore. We just laugh at Naoto as we reflect everything back at her, and also throw in some Rakundas every now and then when there is nothing else to do. The only thing that is actually almighty in this fight is Galgulum Eyes, which puts the target at 1 HP, so this attack literally can't kill us. After about 6 minutes of laughing at the boss, we win the battle and go from level 18 to 21, with Izanagi going from 14 to 15. After the master was Shadow Mitsuo, that was a very welcome change of pace. We continue on with our normal lives, ranking up party members and going on bike trips again. At this point, Yukiko also finally gets access to Maturunda. I briefly talked about this earlier, but this is actually really important since it's literally our only way to decrease the enemy's attack. Not a single party member in the entire game starts with an attack debuff, and since we can't switch personas either, we didn't have access to it until now. This was also the reason why I said Yukiko will probably be part of my final setup later, since this debuff was way too good to pass on. We also max out Kanji's social link and drag everybody to the cinema once October hits. The fog sets in, nobody appears at the Midnight Channel, Naoto is saved, joins the party, and good grief, Naoto is a beast in this challenge. Not only is she level 55, she also has access to several tier 3 spells, knows Megidola, and learns Tetrakarn rather soon. Combine that with her also having no weakness and also getting Divine Grace from the bike trips later on, she is by far the most powerful party member in this setup. Anyways, the party gives a concert at Junes, the guys go stage diving, and Kanji does his best impression of a full Scorpion, and if you don't know what that is, just Google it. It's incredibly hilarious and also super painful at the same time. We also max out Rise, so not only do we have the AoE block now, We also get a free Enduring Soul type revive, where HP and SP are fully restored if our protagonist goes down. Another layer of extra security is a huge plus considering how underleveled we are at this point. We get going with Naoto's social link, and considering that there isn't that much time to max her out, it's very good that we are already done with every other necessary party member, so we can now fully focus on her. Naoto will also be our waifu in this challenge. Like in my last Persona 5 Royal challenge, again, she usually isn't my first choice in this game, but she definitely pulls the most weight in this challenge, so it's only fair we romance her. Since we once again aced our exams, we get the beat ring from Nanako, which basically doubles evasion against magic attacks. I would like to say that it's the same effect as the Angelic Grace passive, but Angelic Grace doesn't work on Almighty attacks and specifically tells you that, while the beat ring just says increases evasion against magic. So I'm not sure if Almighty is included in this one too. Anyways, it's still an incredibly useful accessory. There is also the school festival, but we'll just skip that since there isn't anything good to talk about here anyways. One thing a lot of you may not know, however, is that on Halloween you can actually decline Yosuke's invitation to help out at Junes. And while that itself isn't so special, what is special is that on Halloween you can actually take Naoto on a bike date. The majority of guides out there say that there are only 6 opportunities to go on a bike trip with Naoto, which is technically not true since there is another one available here, but yeah. I guess the majority of people miss that, since you would miss out on Halloween costumes otherwise. Unfortunately, only 2 of those bike rides with Naoto are available before the New Year, so we won't be getting Divine Grace for a while still. At this point, it's already November, so you know what that means. Once again, we drag everybody important to the cinema for yet another level. We also start quest number 54 now, where the woman on Odaiba is looking for her dog. We can't complete that as long as it's rainy, but more on that in a few. Dojima finds a warning letter, Nanako gets kidnapped, Dojima crashes his car, and Namatame escapes into the TV world with Nanako. Technically we're off into the next dungeon now, but before that we still want to complete the quest that we have just gotten. The missing dog is standing at the Susai Daigaku stand, and you need to feed him 3 times and then call it by its name. Once that is done, you can return to Odaiba, complete the quest, and get the reward, which is incredibly useful. The Haikara shirt not only has quite some more defense than our current armor, its bonus effect also increases experience gained by the one wearing it by 50%, and that is huge. Main character is severely underleveled, and this should give us a good opportunity to get some bonus experience and maybe a few additional levels after boss fights. And with that, we're off into the next dungeon of the game. Going into Heaven again isn't anything special for the most part. On floor 7 we have the mini boss waiting, and once again it is one we can do with solo protagonist. The only thing happening here is the boss first mind charging and then throwing out an elemental attack. So basically the boss mind charges, we get wiped, Risa revives us, we can easily set up a magical mirror and watch the mini boss destroy itself, and yeah, that's pretty much it already. The big difference here though is the amount of experience we get. Thanks to the Haikara shirt, we get a 50% boost, which helps us immensely and gets main character from level 21 to 25, so a full 4 levels. Izanami also gets a 4 level boost going from 15 to 19, so yeah, getting that armor was definitely the right call. We continue on throughout the dungeon until we reach the final floor and head into the next boss fight against Kunino Sagiri. This time I decided to go in with a full party. Even though Kunino Sagiri only uses magical attacks, in its last phase it starts spamming Unerring Justice, which is a very strong AoE Almighty attack, so I thought we probably couldn't outdamage him with only a single party member, but let's look into this fight first. The boss goes through 4 phases. In phase 1 he would usually mostly attack with single target magic, which is not too dangerous, but if there is a magic mirror up, he will always use Spirit Drain first, and then follow it up with Makara Break on the next turn. While this means that we can't reflect anything back, at the same time it also means that we effectively lock the boss into this pattern by throwing 1 magic mirror every other turn, meaning we won't get attacked ever. We use our damaging items and also some tier 3 spells from Naoto, which actually deal decent amounts of damage until we hit the next phase of the fight. At this point, the boss will use Quad Converge, which greatly increases the damage of one element while decreasing the damage of all other ones. Since he stops using Makara Break now, we can easily set up mirrors on everybody and watch the boss wreck itself. He does this for 3 turns, which is already enough for him to not only skip phase 3, we also skipped the last phase and straight up defeated the boss before it could even transition into anything else. Since we got a full party this time, Protagonist only gets a single level going from 25 to 26. That means the next boss is done and we only got 3 more dungeons remaining. While we watched the aftermath of what transpired, I couldn't help but think to myself that this was way too easy, and if there might be a way to maybe do this with just the protagonist in order to get quite some more experience on him. Because of this, I decided to save on a new slot and actually reload my old one to check if we can do this with a single character setup. Once again we start the battle, this time solo, and throw the first magic mirror to lock it into its Makara Break pattern during phase 1. To my surprise though, the single character setting seems to mess up its AI pattern quite a bit. Kuni no Sagiri doesn't even use Makara Break, but just uses regular magic like it would if there were no magic repels at all. Not only that, but also phase transitions seem to be very different than what they are with a full party setup. Usually Quad Converge happens when roughly 25 to 30% of its HP are depleted. In this scenario, it didn't happen until we were like halfway through the fight. My guess is because in this scenario, Kuni no Sagiri can't take control of your party members since you're going in solo, it results in completely eliminating the entire phase 3 to begin with. So once again we reflect everything back at the boss, and to my surprise, once Quad Converge ran out, the boss just renewed it and we went through another cycle. The reflects probably didn't do enough damage to push it into the Unerring Justice phase, and since it can't transition phases until Quad Converge runs out, we get 3 more turns of reflected damage, which are surprisingly enough to win the battle already. Turns out this was just as easy in a solo setup than with a full party, and because of this, we now also get the full experience from the fight, getting Protagonist from level 25 to 28, so 2 more levels than we would have got with a full party setup. Anyways, since we're done with the dungeon portion of this point rather early again, we have quite some downtime now. Yukiko gets access to Mind Charge during her last bike ride, and we max both Mori and Naoto, and are basically done with the social link aspect of the game. We still have to get Evade Physical on Teddy, as well as Angelic Grace on Naoto from the bike skills, but those won't happen until a while later since both aren't available that often. We also do bike trips with Rise if there is nothing else to do to further strengthen our all-out attacks. Nanako dies, but not really since we don't throw Namatame into the TV, and we come to the conclusion that Adachi is actually behind everything. Adachi escapes into the TV world and we're off into the next dungeon of the game. Unlike every other dungeon so far though, you want to hold off on this one for a little while since the game skips forward in time once you beat it. Since we aced our exams yet again, we also get the partial award, which gives our protagonist an additional endure. While that is a very nice thing to have, it probably won't see much usage since there are other accessories that are more useful for our challenge run setting. In the few days we have left, we get some more money by working part-time jobs and also grow some more veggies. Since we have pretty much maxed out all the important social links at this point, there isn't really much left to do anymore. We head into the dungeon on the 18th. Even though we theoretically have a couple of days left, I went in a little early so we have a bit of leeway in case some unexpected things happen and we need to do some extra shopping or stuff. On floor 3, we have the first mini-boss waiting, which is a set of several Chaos Fuzz. Since they like to summon even more of them to the field, you want to ideally all beat them on the same turn. Luckily they only have 600 HP and we still have a ton of smart bombs remaining, so taking them out at the same time really isn't a big issue. Unfortunately we can't really do this battle solo, but with a full party it's not a big problem and we get done with the battle rather easily. They also don't really give a lot of experience to begin with, so the difference in fighting them solo compared to a full party isn't really that bad. Before fighting the second mini-boss in floor 6, there is something else we have to do first. In this dungeon, you can find Divine Pillars, which are accessories that have all incoming damage at the cost of not being able to dodge anymore. Since I prefer a more consistent strategy over random dodges anyways, I thought it would definitely be a good thing to grab 4 of those. Luckily, there is RNG manipulation to get those more easily, though it did get much trickier since the game updated due to modern platform releases. The way it works is you teleport out of floor 6, set the game to 90 FPS, restart the game and mash through the intro screen as quickly as possible. If you manage to skip the intro on the first frame, there will be a golden chest spawning on floor 6 containing the Divine Pillar. Big shoutouts to the entire Persona 4 Golden speedrunning community who came up with all kinds of item and skill manipulation. This is incredible. So the reason I wanted to grab those Divine Pillars now already is the upcoming mini-boss Envious Giant. This one only has 2 attacks. Either he does Megidolaon, which deals huge damage to the entire party, or he uses Tenterofu, which can confuse everybody. The plan here is to survive a Megidolaon by decreasing its attack with Matarunda, increasing my own with Diamond Shields, and hoping that the damage reduction from the Divine Pillars is enough to tank the hit. The confusion can be healed with Hiranayas or Amrita Sodas, so we set everything up and wait for the first Megidolaon, and would you look at that, it actually works out perfectly fine. Our protagonist can take the hit, although barely, as well as Teddy and Naoto. Yukiko gets some other accessory on her since even with the Divine Pillar she won't be able to tank the Megidolaon either way. The mini-boss has 3333 HP, so this is going to take a while, but it looks like a solid and consistent strategy. Or it would be, but there is one big issue. Envious Giant usually likes to attack right before Yukiko's turn, and she's the only one not being able to take a Megidolaon. Once that happens, she usually goes down, and after reviving her, the mini-boss gets yet another attack right before her turn. Because of this, more often than not, the attack debuff on the boss runs out, and this is usually where it's game over. But wait, the boss can also use Tenterofu, right? While that is true, due to the high level difference, Tenterofu hits pretty much every single time on Yukiko, therefore, once again not making it possible to keep applying Matarunda. I tried this for a little more than an hour before realizing that this was probably not gonna work out that way. Either Yukiko went down to Megidolaon, or she got confused by Tenterofu. Luckily, there is a way around that problem. We can't make Yukiko any more bulky at this point, but we can prevent her from getting confused. There are 2 accessories available from golden chests that block confusion, so my idea here was that we're applying Matarunda as often as possible, and then hope for him to use the confusion to give Yukiko a free turn to further apply debuffs. So I started searching for a confusion blocking accessory for about 45 minutes, only to find the Book of the Void in the very same chest that we used to manipulate the Divine Pillars earlier. The Book of the Void blocks a variety of status ailments, including confusion, or panic as it's actually called in the game. With that in hand, we head back to the boss one more time to hopefully get the win now. And I don't know whether this boss has brilliant AI or if I was just getting ridiculously unlucky, but in this very attempt he didn't use Megidolaon once, not twice, not 3 times, but 13 freaking times in a row before going for Tenterofu. Luckily Yukiko dodged 3 of those, making it possible to further apply Matarunda, but damn. Either enemy AI is way smarter than I thought, or I had the unluckiest streak ever. Anyways, at this point the mini-boss is almost down, and a couple of Magatamas and Smart Bombs are enough to finish off the fight for good this time around. Even though we had to do this with a full party, we still get some decent experience, getting our protagonist from level 28 to 30, and Izanagi from 21 to 23, and yeah, that's the level we have going into the next boss fight now, and to be honest, I fear for the worst. Before heading in there though, we go back to the real world because we pretty much spent all our Maka leaves in the mini boss fight earlier and now have to restock. This is also the reason why I went into the dungeon a bit earlier than needed. I was already kind of afraid something like this may happen, so that was definitely good awareness here. We stock back up on items and return into the TV world again. Before we're ready to battle the next boss though, I wanted to upgrade the party's equipment since we haven't done that ever since Void Quest. Considering the last two bosses were rather easy, it wasn't really necessary, but now every bit of extra defense can be vital. The Angel Skirt for the girls has pretty nice stats and also has a physical damage reduction of 20%, which might come in handy. The Nubatama suit for the guys doesn't really have any nice bonuses or anything, but it does have a good amount of defense, so that's something. Protagonist is going to keep his Hikari shirt for the plus 50% experience boost for now, and that's all. With that, it is now finally time to tackle the next boss, and this time it's a major boss. Going into this run, my initial thought was if I make it all the way here, this is probably where the challenge is going to end, but let's see how we fare in this encounter. We have our party consisting of a level 30 protagonist, with Yukiko being 24, Teddy at 40, and Naoto at 57, going up against the level 75 boss, so yeah, that is going to be a lot of fun. Everyone wears the new equipment, as well as the Divine Pillar, with the exception of Yukiko once again, since I am pretty sure that if she can't tank the mini-boss, we won't see much difference in the big boss battle either. Because of this, Yukiko gets the Eagle Eye, which gives her triple evasion against physical attacks, and since the boss likes to spam Agni Astra quite a bit, this could be pretty useful. Now on to the boss itself. This boss fight consists of two different battles, the first one being against Adachi himself. Luckily, this one is rather safe. Adachi doesn't have a single almighty attack, so we can literally reflect everything back at him. Since he always starts the battle off with Heat Riser, we also don't have any problem stacking up both physical and magical mirrors on the party. Afterwards, we just watch him wreck himself until the battle is over. Okay, good. Nice to know that this battle is safe, because the next one sure as hell is not going to be. Similar to the mini-boss earlier, we start the fight against Amino Sagiri by applying defense buffs, an attack debuff, as well as a magical and physical mirror on our protagonist. Since the boss attacks twice each turn, the mirrors are vital for keeping main character alive, since we can tank the first hit if it's an almighty one, but not the second one. Luckily, the second attack is usually physical or elemental magic, so we should be safe for now. The plan is keeping the party and especially main character alive while throwing Magatamas at the same time to reduce the enemy's HP. And while this does take quite some time, it actually works out pretty well for the most part. Once you reduce the boss's HP to below 75%, we switch into phase 2 where it will now start using Nebular Oculus, another very strong almighty attack. Luckily, we can also tank this one, so we should still be good for now going forward with our strategy. The next potential roadblock happens when we get close to half of the boss's HP. At this point, we definitely want Yukiko dead before we push the boss into phase 3. Once that happens, the boss uses Bewildering Fog, at which point you cannot damage or put debuffs on the boss anymore as long as the fog is up. During the fog, the boss will also buff itself and charge up before hitting another Nebula Oculus. Luckily, there is a way around this. The way Bewildering Fog probably works is actually not that it makes the boss invincible, but much rather that it puts a status on all party members, making them unable to connect with anything against the boss. However, if a party member is dead when that happens, the status never gets applied, and after reviving them they can actually damage the boss as well as debuff it. And this is what we're banking on here. Since the boss likes to buff its attack after charging up, we revive Yukiko so she can put Mataronda back on the boss. We can't negate the Mind Charge, but with Mataronda on the boss, an active Diamond Shield, Divine Pillars on everybody, plus the entire party guarding the charged attack, I was hoping we might be able to tank this one. And that is exactly what happened. Although barely, the party managed to survive the charged Nebula Oculus, and at this point I was incredibly happy, thinking that there is a good chance we can win this fight. Well, that optimism didn't hold on for very long, because shortly afterwards the party was wiped due to this. Even though Amino Sagiri can only use one almighty attack per turn, this doesn't seem to be the case anymore once we hit phase 3, since a Megiddola Nebula Oculus or even a double Nebula Oculus can and will happen. I'm not going to lie, at this point I was severely disappointed. After surviving the charged attack, I was very confident that we can win this battle, but this just straight up destroyed everything. Surviving one attack with all those setups is possible, but tanking 2 attacks just is not going to work. I gave this strategy a couple of more attempts, but the result was always the same. Every time we made it past the first Bewildering Fog, it's only 2 or 3 turns until a double Almighty happens and then we wipe. The hard truth is, this strategy was not going to work out. There was one more thing I had in the back of my mind, and it was something I didn't really want to use at all since it's super random and RNG heavy. Our last hope is as simple as it's going to be annoying. If we can't tank the attack, our only choice is to dodge it. Because of this, we replace Yukiko with Kanji since he has access to Mazukunda, and since we have quite a few supersonics as well, we can also buff our own evasion. Before committing to this strategy and trying to optimize our setup, I wanted to see how far I can even potentially get, so we took Kanji with us, unequipped all Divine Pillars, and put the beat chain on main character for extra magic evasion. I was honestly not really expecting much. Trying to dodge almost all attacks in this kind of setup was going to be very unlikely, but at this point it's pretty much our only chance. And to my surprise, it actually worked out better than I expected at first. Just like before, we put both mirrors on the protagonist, but this time around our setup only involves casting Mazukunda and throwing Supersonic to maximize our chance of dodging attacks. While party members still regularly go down, the chance of them dodging an attack is quite a bit higher than what I thought it was gonna be. The important question though is how main character is going to fare. We can reflect all elemental magic and physical attacks, but the almighty attacks have to be dodged. The first attempt made it past the first scripted Nebula Oculus, and the party only got wiped because I wasn't able to put a magic mirror up in time due to having to revive the majority of my party during recovery. Second attempt also died at the first Nebula Oculus, but the third attempt actually made it past the first Bewildering Fog and died a bit later due to another almighty attack. I did one more attempt just to see if I can get there regularly or if I was getting pretty good luck here, and lo and behold, attempt number 4 not only made it past the first Bewildering Fog again, it actually made it all the way to the second Bewildering Fog that happens when you push the boss below 25% of its HP. Unfortunately, we couldn't dodge this one and the fight ends here, but this showed me that while it is a huge lottery, it may just be possible. Because of this, we tried to optimize our entire setup to dodge or reflect as many attacks as possible. We went back into the Heaven Dungeon to grab an Amaterasu Hitoe armor for Naoto. This one has a medium chance to reflect physical attacks, so basically the Counter-Strike passive, which is roughly 15%. For the guys, we had to settle with the purple suit we already got earlier, which can also repel physical damage, but only with low odds, so basically the counter skill. Luckily, both of those armors still have decent evasion. The more important part though are the Cat Whisker accessories. Those can be found in Magatsu Inaba as well, and they double the user's magic evasion, so basically the Divine Grace skill. This process took me another 2.5 hours, but now we should be ready to go and head into the boss fight once again. And considering this video is already getting pretty long at this point, we're not going to go through every single attempt here, but I'll show you footage of some attempts while we'll talk about the most important parts here. Since we put both physical and magical mirrors on the protagonist, he basically only needs to dodge the almighty attacks, which in phase 1 is only Megiddola, in phase 2 Nebula Oculus, and from phase 3 on both of those, and oftentimes within a single turn. In general, pretty much every attempt made it at least to the first scripted Nebula Oculus at 75%. About half of them made it to the first Bewildering Fog at 50%, and then pretty much every attempt ended soon afterwards. Main character in theory can be hit up to 3 times. On the first time, Rise is going to block the AoE attack, but that usually happens rather early in the fight since that one is also triggered when another party member would be wiped. The second one is the Enduring Soul Revive that gets triggered when the protagonist goes down the first time. This one has the disadvantage that for whatever reason Amino Sagiri usually gets a third attack in on this very turn, so while it is a safety anchor, it doesn't really help all too much either, and yeah, the next hit basically means game over. In the end, it comes down to dodging almighty attacks. I had a few attempts where I got all the way to the first Bewildering Fog, with the main character still having his Risa Revive active, but even those ended soon after, usually to a back-to-back Nebula Oculus, or in combination with Megiddola. To sum it up, I have about 15 hours of game footage from just this fight. After I made it to the second Bewildering Fog for the first time, back before optimizing my setup, I thought this might be possible, but ever since then I didn't have a single attempt that got that far again. At this point I got really frustrated and actually thought about calling it a day and just quitting the run. It seemed I got incredibly lucky on that one attempt that made it all the way to the second Bewildering Fog. I turned off the game thinking this was not gonna work out and ready to just quit. About an hour later, my stubbornness got the better of me and I turned the game back on, and on the very first attempt, this happened. The fight started off like normal, applying mirrors, evasion buffs and debuffs. The first part of the fight was pretty good. Naoto went down early, but otherwise the majority of the party did a pretty good job dodging all kinds of stuff. Rise's AoE block didn't actually happen until the first scripted Nebula Oculus, which was already a good start to everything. Between this one and the first scripted Bewildering Fog, I didn't get a single almighty attack. Kanji was down when we pushed the boss past half of its HP, so we were able to continue debuffing during the fog phase too. The fog lifted, the charged attack happened, and everybody but the protagonist went down. At this point I already thought the fight was over, but we still had the Rise revive, so I tried to recover, and we actually did. And then I got real lucky. Due to recovery, I forgot to renew the physical mirror on the protagonist, and on the following turn I dodged both Megidola and the single target physical attack. Now mind you, the Beat Shade accessory does not work on physical attacks, so this dodge was incredibly lucky. Next turn, double Megidola, both dodged. At this point I was starting to get real nervous. This was by far the best attempt we have gotten since the test run right in the beginning. After dodging yet another Megidola, we dealt enough damage with our Magatamas to push him to the second Bewildering Fog, but this one is usually accompanied by a Quake first. Yet another almighty attack, and again we dodge. Luckily Kanji went down to the Quake, so we can continue debuffing Amino's Sagiri evasion even through the fog. Since you can't really do anything during fog phase anyways, I also decided to cast a physical mirror on Naoto as a backup in case she can dodge the Nebula Oculus. Unlike the first fog phase, the second one is lifted before Nebula Oculus is cast, which gives us a nice way to throw some more Magatamas before the big attack happens. So here comes the attack, and we dodge again. If I wasn't shaking already at this point, I definitely started to now. Even Naoto, who we put the physical mirror on, survived as well. We are officially in the last phase of this battle for the first time, and main character still has his Rise revive available. We get everybody back in the mix again and renew our evasion buff since we also got the Kajat by the boss, and at this point something weird happened. The boss used another Dekaja and then single targeted Naoto, who reflected thanks to the physical mirror. The interesting thing about this is, up to this point, Dekaja or Dekunda only happened when the boss hit a weakness on the party member and got a one more, but it seems like in the last phase those spells are used as regular attacks. In fact, the following turn I got Dekaja and Dekunda with the boss not even attacking me, and that is basically a free turn since we only need 2 actions to renew those before going back to damage with our Magatamas. Are we actually going to do this? We reapply buffs and debuffs and continue going to work with Magatamas. And another Dekaja, followed by physical attack that only wiped Naoto. And afterwards, another Dekaja Dekunda turn. I literally can't believe what is happening at this point. Set up buffs and debuffs again, and throw some more Magatamas. Another attack on Naoto gets reflected. Agni Ezra gets reflected by 3 more party members, and that's it. We did it! We actually did it! And to top it off, we never even triggered Rise's emergency revive. Main character didn't get hit a single time in the entire fight. You can see me here not advancing text, which was because I literally jumped out of my seat and ran a victory lap. I couldn't believe what just happened. The run continues on. We take Adachi back to the real world where the police arrests him, the fog is gone, and we save the world. For now at least. Naoto comes over on Christmas to celebrate our victory, and Dojima and Nanako are allowed to come home for a couple of days. New Year hits, and now we have some downtime again until it's dungeon time. Since a new month hit, we are once again dragging everybody important into the cinema for the extra level, and we also get the third awakening on everybody. This is especially important for Naoto, who learned Shield of Justice, and Yukiko who learns Burning Petals. We also do the remaining bike trips with Naoto in order to get Angelic Grace on her. Other than that, there isn't really much to talk about at this point, so let's skip ahead. We go on a skiing trip, end up in an old hut, and enter the Hollow Forest in order to save Marie. And as you may know, this dungeon works a little different than previous ones. The moment you enter the Hollow Forest, the game takes away all your equipment and also items. Considering we have been relying on items quite a bit throughout the entire game had me fearing for the worst, but let's look into it. The items in here are mostly either Sentu Petals to restore SP, Sacred Branches that act as go-homes, and equipment upgrades. On higher floors, you can find armor that repels a certain element, which is a nice way of eliminating everyone's weakness. But let's start with the first mini-boss on floor 4, the Gorgeous King. The boss is only weak to physical attacks and takes huge amounts of damage from almighty attacks. The plan here is basically to knock everything down using a weakness hit, and then go for an all-out attack. Remember how we went on bike trips with Rise early in the game? This fight is literally the only reason why we did that. If Rise joins the all-out attack, the damage will be quite a bit higher. A normal all-out attack to the boss does around 200 damage, while one with Rise can do up to 550 damage, so you can see that it does make quite the difference. Other than that, there isn't much to talk about here. The mini-boss is generally quite annoying, but not really a big issue as long as you exploit all weaknesses and go for all-out attacks. We get another level going from 30 to 31 and continue on until we run into the next mini-boss on floor 7, the Heavy Giant, and this one is actually quite the issue. Heavy Giant is immune to all elements, resists physical, and also has high resistance against almighties, so two ways to go at it is either hit it with physical attacks or use elemental break items and follow up with magic. That's not all though. The mini-boss itself has a wide variety of attacks from elemental magic, physical attacks, and also status ailments. And considering we don't have access to our mirrors, we don't really have a lot of ways of mitigating damage either. Since we already got a couple of fire break items, the best way to go at it is to use those, Mind Charge both Naoto and Yukiko, and then follow up with Argidyne and Burning Petals. Teddy can decrease the boss's defense, and protagonists can also Tarokaja the girls to increase their damage. Naoto did pretty good damage, almost hitting for 1000 damage, while Yukiko, well, we never really found out how much damage she would do since pretty much all of her attacks seemed to miss due to the low level. And while we don't have access to our mirrors, Naoto can still cast Tetrakarn on main character to add an extra layer of safety, and this was what eventually got us the victory. The mini-boss used Mind Slice, which got reflected and killed itself in the process. A very messy boss fight overall, but I am happy that we got through it. Unfortunately, this fight barely gives any experience, so we don't even get a level up from it, even with 2 party members dead at the end of the battle. And yeah, that's pretty much all to that dungeon. We grind some more items on the last floor in order to get about 10 firebreak items, as well as a repel armor for every party member. Once we're done with that, we go into the boss battle against Marie. I wasn't expecting a first try victory here, but I wanted to see what kind of incoming damage we would have to expect in this fight. Marie starts off the fight using Hot Lightning on 2 characters, which already triggered their Endure, so that's a great start already. And the Megidolaon after, yeah. That was with a Matarunda up, so needless to say, tanking is not going to be a thing in this battle. Luckily, we already have a solution for this. Since both forms of Marie only attack once every turn, we can completely negate all incoming damage using Naoto's Shield of Justice skill from her 3rd awakening. The big downside to this? It costs 160 SP per use, and our only means of regenerating SP are Sentu Petals, which only heal for 50. So not only will it be incredibly hard to keep up with SP regeneration, we will also need a ton of Sentu Petals to get us through both fights. Because of that, we went back to floor 2 of the dungeon where Sentu Petals drop pretty regularly. I suspect that we would probably need around 35 to 40 to get through both phases. So let's quickly take a look at our party setup before we go approach the boss again. We get our protagonist at level 31, with Yukiko on 26, Teddy on 42, and Naoto on 59. We also got a repel armor for the elements each party member is weak to. And you can throw anything on Naoto since she doesn't have any natural weaknesses. Naoto is also the one to get my only Anger Stone since it heals 20 SP per turn and also stacks with her Invigorate 3 passive abilities, so she will restore quite some SP automatically every turn too. If Naoto gets hit by Hot Lightning on turn 1, Rise's block will already be used up by turn 2, but that shouldn't matter since at that point Naoto should spam Shield of Justice every turn anyways. Teddy and Protagonist are mostly here to throw Sentu Petals and debuff the enemy's defense, while Yukiko goes for Mind Charge and follows them up with Burning Petals. Kinda funny how our lowest leveled party member is our main damage source for phase 1. Anyways, once you deplete about a third of her HP, she uses Shell of Denial, and at this point phase 1 is pretty much over. Since it takes a couple of turns for her to transition, we use that opportunity to heal everybody and get Naoto's SP up as much as possible. Her second form is counted as a separate battle, so everyone's SP will also be halved going in, therefore you want to make sure to get Naoto's SP as close to max as possible. Marie transforms into Kuzumi no Okami and the second part of the battle starts. Phase 2 is pretty much the same as before. Her first attack triggers Rise's AoE block, and afterwards it's more Shield of Justice to not take damage. The main difference is that in this form Kuzumi no Okami repels all elements, so before we can go for an attack, we have to throw a Fire Break in order to get through to her. Occasionally Marie will also have turns where she won't attack. This not only means that we don't have to renew our Shield of Justice, it also means that Naoto can Mind Charge or Archidine on those turns to deal some extra damage. The damage from the girls is actually surprisingly good due to Marie's low endurance stats, so at this point the only question that remains is, can we beat Kuzumi no Okami before running out of Sentu Petals? And the answer to this is, well, almost. We run out of Sentu Petals after we got her down to the last 5-ish% of her health, and afterwards we can't really do anything other than watch us getting wrecked. It appears we need just a couple of more Sentu Petals to get through this. So we stack up some more of those, getting a total of 46, and then return to the fight. And since it's still the same as before, we're just gonna quickly go through this. Set up the shield, get through phase 1, do the same for phase 2, and eventually win the battle. It was still a close call though. I literally had to use all my Sentu Petals and got the win with the last attack on the first turn where the party was unprotected. Whatever. We made it, that's all that matters here. Marie saved, we return to the real world, spend Valentine's Day with our waifu, and get ready to leave on the last day in March. We say goodbye to everybody, meet up at Junes, get the Orb of Sight, find out it's the gas station attendee that gets identified as Izanami, and are off into the final dungeon of the game, this time for real. The first mini-boss on floor 3 is something we can tackle solo protagonist again since it exclusively uses physical attacks, and we got our mirrors back after returning from the Hollow Forest. Unfortunately, it attacks twice before we get to act, where the first one will trigger Rise's revive, and the second one knocks us out for good. Luckily, we already got a means against that. Remember when I said that Nanako's Enduring won't see much use? Well, turns out I was wrong, because it's a perfect fit for this battle. The first hit will trigger the Endure, the second hit Rise's revive, and afterwards we can set up physical mirrors and watch the boss destroy itself. Main character gets 2 more levels, going from 31 to 33, and we continue on to the next mini-boss on floor 6. This is one we'll tackle with a full party since it has a variety of moves, including status ailments that are follow-up with insta-kill attacks, Moragidine, or even Migdolaon. Moragidine is the skill we want to see her mostly. Yukiko absorbs fire and Naoto nulls it, so if we throw a magical mirror on the protagonist, we're pretty safe from this one. Mahamaon is not an issue either, since we have a lot of insta-death protection items too. And yeah, that's all there is to it. Throw Magatamas, watch out for status ailments, and repeat that until the boss is dead. We get 1 more level, going from 33 to 34, and that's it for the game everybody. We're about to head into the final boss fight of this game. Once again, we equip everybody but Yukiko with the Divine Pillar since I was pretty sure the party is gonna be able to take a hit. And that's it everybody, time for the final boss. Unsurprisingly, Izanami once again consists of 2 fights. The first fight is rather easily manageable. On her first turn, Izanami will always use Maziodyne, so we throw magic mirrors on everybody to get some good damage in early. Izanami also only acts once per turn, so once we set up our buffs and debuffs, the party can luckily tank the hit just like I was hoping for. And yeah, that's actually all there is to the first fight, to be honest. Keep the party's HP up, revive Yukiko, watch your buffs and debuffs, and go to work using Magatamas whenever you can. The only thing you need to watch out for is when Izanami does Mind Charge, since she will follow it up with Make It Alone most of the time, and the only way to survive that is with an extra guard. But even that is not that big of a problem, and Izanami already goes down shortly afterwards. We use the Orb of Sight to unveil her true form, and the final boss battle begins, and this one is already quite a bit trickier. Izanami no Okami will attack twice each turn, and this is the main reason why we put on the Divine Pillars. The plan is to block her first attack using Naoto's Shield of Justice yet again, and then tank the second attack with our buffs, debuffs, and the Divine Pillar, and this seems to work out perfectly. Now once again, the only issue is, do we have enough SP regenerating items to keep the shield up until we're able to beat the boss? Well, this time around it's not that easy. Unlike in the Marie battle, not only do we have to keep our SP up, we also have to continue buffing, debuffing, reviving, and also healing. Therefore, we don't really get a lot of opportunities to attack, and considering the boss has 8000 HP and we only deal 150 damage with a single Magatama, well, you can guess how quickly we burn through our SP items. After 15 minutes of fighting this phase alone, I was pretty much through all my major SP items and got only about 25% of the boss's health down, so yeah, that was not going to work out. While doing this fight, I noticed something different though. Yukiko, while having 245 HP, was only taking about 350 damage from Fury of Yasogami, which is her second attack 90% of the time. If we put a Divine Pillar on Yukiko as well, the entire party should be able to tank this. Not only would this mean that we can put on debuffs more often, due to not having to revive Yukiko constantly, we also get way more turns where we can throw Magatamas. So I decided to throw the fight, go back and equip the Divine Pillar on Yukiko, and went back in again. The first fight was pretty similar to before, the only difference being that with the Divine Pillar, Yukiko even has a chance to survive Make It Alone when the boss hits a low damage roll. But that wasn't the important part. The more important part happens once we hit phase 2. We closely watched the first Fury of Yasogami, and would you look at that, not only did Yukiko tank it, she even had a pretty good amount of HP left at this point. So basically we continue on like before, buffing, debuffing, and healing while throwing Magatamas on turns where we can. Occasionally the boss will also use Power Charge on her second turn. She will always follow that up with Agni Astra, so on those turns we throw physical mirrors instead of setting up Shield of Justice. And yeah, I would love to talk about how certain phase changes might throw me off guard or anything, but to be honest, this strategy is incredibly safe and consistent. No matter what happens, we always shield the first attack and tank the second one. The only question that remains is, do we have enough SP items to last until the end of the fight? Well, let's skip forward a little and find out. We're pretty deep into the fight here, and as you can see at this point, all our big SP items are gone. We use our last Shield of Justice, and then just go berserk throwing items with everybody. With no protection left, we throw everything we can at the boss, but it's barely not enough. Then I got lucky though. After tanking the first hit, the boss uses Summons to Yomi, which is an insta-kill attack to everybody inflicted with status ailments, and that's basically a free attack here. We throw a couple of more Magatamas, and that is it, everybody. The final fight of this challenge is officially over and won. We go through the last couple of scripted attacks, use Myriad Truths, and end this once and for all. Now, while we watch the last couple of cutscenes, let me quickly talk about this challenge because honestly, I didn't think this would be even possible at all. Like I mentioned earlier, I was pretty sure that if I make it all the way to Amenosagiri that the run would end there, and well, to be fair, it almost did. I think this was probably the hardest challenge I attempted up to this point, so I'm really happy that I was actually able to complete it as well. And yeah, I think that's it for the most part. If you enjoy the content, feel free to subscribe to the channel to not miss out on future videos. And also special shoutouts go to this video's Patreon, Nervarel. If you want to join the Patreon as well, the link is below in the video description. Becoming a Patreon gives you 48-hour early access to new challenge runs, among other things. But enough of the plugs for now. Thank you all for watching and supporting the channel. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed the run, and I hope to see all of you here next time again. Until then, take care.